Okie pokey weirdos, I'm Rev, and I might be just a little bit of an Elvis fan. A bit. And when you talk about any person, any human, there's gonna be some controversy in there.
For myself personally, with being an Elvis fan, I do heavily separate the art from the artist.
With the 68 comeback done and over with, and the 70s jumpsuits coming in next, let's talk a little bit about Bill Ballou. Story time! Reading directly out of the book for this one. Oh, I put a bookmark in there and it still doesn't want to open. Come on. Throughout his 50-year career, Bill Ballou designed costumes for many stars, including Ella Fitzgerald, The Band, Gladys Knight, Brooke Shields, and Gloria Estefan. However, it is his work with Elvis for which he is best known. With his jumpsuit design, Bill literally changed rock and roll fashion. Bill did not work alone. It was a collaboration between Bill and Jean Doucet to design, stud, and even embroider many of Elvis's stage outfits. Bill turned over some of Elvis's jumpsuit design projects to him in '72. So while in the book, Bill is credited for the design of every single suit in here, Jean was a huge part of most of these suits once we hit about '72. And as a costume designer myself, I was absolutely drooling over these handmade sketches Bill did himself, walking down the hallways of the museum, seeing every single little sketchy bit and piece that Bill came up with. Some things not even fully coming into fruition, some things being added to suits that were already being planned. It was just so cool to look at. And I have now reached 1969 in Vegas, which means I got a costume change again and a backdrop change, because we're getting into the 70s. 1969, we got the two-piece sets inspired by his gis, because he'd gotten super into karate by this time. These gi-inspired two-pieces were also called the herringbone suits. There were white, black, and navy versions of this outfit. Two black versions, one with red kick pleats and one with black. And if you're wondering what kick pleats are, they're most commonly seen in the back of skirts these days, where it helps flare open the fabric to give yourself a little more room to move. The kick pleats is what gave his pant legs so much flair, and very much a bell-bottom looking situation. For these suits, he normally wore the herringbone belts that matched per color, but one other belt that he was known to have worn with these was the red and black striped belt inspired by a gi belt. I took plenty pictures of the black one while I was at the museum. However, don't you love when you can't get any good pictures at museums because all of the lights are reflecting off the glass? Especially when you're trying to take pictures of a black item. The black gi-inspired two-piece also became super famous because it was well known as his Black Panther look, because he had some sort of energy on the stage that had a lot of people describing him as a Black Panther.
Kathy leaned over to me and she said, "Bill, that's got to be the sexiest man alive. It's like a Black Panther stalking a stage. You can feel the sexual heat coming from him."
And since we're on gis, I might as well show you some of the pictures I took of his gis. I've taken jujitsu, and once you look at one gi, it feels like you've seen them all, so I wasn't super interested in the gi part, but I thought some people might like to see the pictures. We're on to the white leather two-piece. This was essentially the white cousin of the black two-piece that we got at 68 Comeback, and it was often worn with either the metal concho belt or the white lion head belt. This brown two-piece was only ever photographed off stage. However, there is a book that suggests that he also wore this two-piece on stage during August 10th, 1969, during a midnight showing. 1970, we get the on-stage suit. First seen in January, this suit is recognized by its macrame rope collar. The collar was hand-woven, as was the belt that matches it. He was first seen wearing it January of 1970 in Vegas. Now we have an army of brocade suits. Firstly is the black brocade. We've only ever seen one picture of him wearing this, but it does have an awesome tapestry-inspired unicorn design along the neckline. And it was known to be worn with either the black macrame belt or the red beads belt. The black brocade suit with gold trim, slightly different. This one had a fish/whale theme embroidered into the collar. And there are no known photos of him ever wearing this. Although based on the design and how closely it resembles the unicorns, the guess is it was created in 1970. No known photos of this one ever having a belt, although there is a quote that says, "The belt is weaved macrame in black with gold-colored studs." Then we have the white brocade collar jumpsuit. It came with a white macrame belt and had gold and silver detailing along the collar. And I forgot I still need my book for this part because there's a quote in here I want from this page. Brocade. Oh, I flipped right to it. Holy cow. Quote from the book. To allow Elvis to move more freely during his performances, the two-piece tunic outfits quickly were adapted into one-piece jumpsuits. Bill liked to work with stretch... Oh, I feel like I should know this word. My dyslexia is hitting me hard. Okay, hang on. Pronunciation.
Gabardine.
Gabardine. Bill liked to work with stretch gabardine, a material used normally when making outfits for figure skaters. The material allowed Elvis great versatility during his shows. Simple in design, these jumpsuits were first adorned with brocade, collars, beaded fringe, and studwork designs, accompanied by macrame belt, and those often got tangled on stage. For the white brocade, I got a number of pictures of it while I was at the museum. I was taking really teeny tiny detailed pictures of this one because I knew it was one of the older suits, and I kept finding all these little bitty stains all over it that I found very interesting to see that it was lived in. I first found a little dark stain up by the right shoulder. I'm wondering if you got some sort of food or drink on it at some point. But one of the marks left on the suit that I found super interesting and that I ended up seeing on almost every single suit after I noticed it, there's this long straight black mark along the left pant leg of this suit. And it looks like a pin mark. And I noticed on multiple other suits that there were these pin mark strikes across every single freaking pant leg. Because he was so busy signing everything, he always had a pin in his hand and he was constantly marking up that pant leg. Other brocades included the orange version, which I took pictures of, and I was getting in super detailed for these photos because I noticed there was hand stitching on a lot of these outfits. Electric sewing machines existed by this point, had for a while. But so many of his suits have a lot of hand stitching where you would see the stitching on the outside of the suit. I know part of that is because so many of these suits had to get re-seamed as his body weight changed, and a lot of those were emergency stitchings when he'd ripped the suit. Although I can't say for sure if that's for every single one that has hand stitching. It might have simply been a design choice. I also noticed how far up the zipper went, and as soon as the zipper has ended, there are hook and eye loops to help keep the suit closed to a certain point, and put less strain on that poor zipper. Another brocade is the thin green leaf. It came with a green macrame belt, and there are very few pictures of him ever wearing this one. Took pictures of this one myself as well. I really like the gold and green on this one. Perfect for St. Patty's Day. The blue brocade was worn during the January-February of '70 in Vegas, as well as during his tour in Houston. This suit was also called the Blue Snake, worn with a white macrame belt. And oddly enough, even though it had all the white accents, he wore this one with black boots. Which gives us some time to talk about boots, because I won't be mentioning them a whole lot after this. They were usually either black or white, although they do have some fun designs, so here are some pictures I took of some of his boots. Gotta love museums making it hard to take pictures with all the lights reflecting off the glass. And in 1970 we got his documentary, That's the Way It Is. On the cover of that documentary he's wearing this suit, the leather and chains, Known for wearing this in Vegas, he had a huge variety of belts that he commonly wore with this suit, so I'm going to read them off. A great big thank you to elvisinconcert.com, who had this whole list of costumes. I initially made this from memory and from my own pictures, as well as my book. I had about 400 slides, and then I got nearly 450 slides after visiting this website and realizing which costumes I was missing and that I could have been using this website the whole time. The leather and chain suit was worn with the white macrame belt, sometimes the brown, sometimes the red, and then the black or dark brown karate belts, as well as the white chain belt. Took my own pictures of this one as well. When you walk into the museum, they actually have 3 suits shown off first before you go look at all the other ones, because these were the first few that were in the documentary. And if you notice, I'm going to be mentioning the belts a lot because, especially with these 3 suits, they can be pretty bland because they're just white with teeny tiny extra details, and it was the belts that made them as flashy as they were. The leather and chain suit, when I took the pictures, I realized that these shoes were actually pretty beat up. He had creased the hell out of these toes. I was also taking great detail in seeing the stitching on the inside of the cuff and seeing how the lining was attached to the rest of the outfit. This suit was also closed with a hook and eye at the top of the zipper, as well as these chains are actually little snaps, so he can pop those off. You'll see in a lot of pictures he started undoing them during the concert because he needed this a little more open so he could breathe, as well as move. Gotta love the glass getting in the way of the picture. And again! There's even a length of chain that drags on the floor because it's clipped at the ankle, and that would drive me nuts. I would probably trip over it, fall on my face. Just under the armpits of this costume there are these little bitty studs, so I tried to get that detail pictured as well. And I wanted to get a better idea of how the chains were woven through the macrame so that I could hopefully recreate it myself.
There's also this blue lace suit from the intro of That's the Way It Is.
Next suit was the beaded fringe suit, also seen on That's the Way It Is. He wore this during performances in Vegas in the 70s, and it was either worn with the white macrame belt, but also the green or the blue. While taking pictures of this one myself, I noticed how roughed up the knees on this one was. He apparently went down on his knees a lot in this costume, and you'll see that with some of the other ones where the knees are beat all to hell. And you know, wearing knee pads wasn't a huge thing back then, especially with the toxic masculinity taking over, making these big name performers think that they are invincible, as well as cannot go beyond this certain point of safety for their image. And I think to how these days Taylor Swift has these really pretty bedazzled knee pads, and I'm like, Elvis, you could have been the first one to do that, but no. It would have been so cool to see matching knee pads for these suits. I wish that had been a thing. Especially since he had so many knee problems, it would have helped a lot. These pictures also gave me an idea of how wide the cuff on the inside of the pant leg was, and dang, they're chunky. Next suit was the concho suit. If you're not sure what a concho is, it's those little metal circles that the ropes are woven through. Sometimes the concho is also the one used on the album cover for That's the Way It Is. He usually wore this suit in Vegas. Originally he wore it with the white macrame belt, but often later wore it with the gold attendance belt. I saw this one at the museum as well. Knees are a little roughed up, but not nearly as bad as the other one. Boots aren't quite as beat up either. The red ladder suit, normally seen with the red snakeskin belt, while it was seen in the That's the Way It Is, it was only worn once after that documentation. When taking pictures of this one myself, I was actually fascinated by the fact that this red leather was puckering so bad. Sewing leather to a stretch fabric is quite difficult, so I can understand why the puckering is there, but it was really interesting to me that there was puckering, considering this is a big name costume design. And we still have that little detail of puckering, proving how difficult it is to work with those two very different kinds of materials. These cuffs also have matching snakeskin buttons along the back wrist. And in this picture, it was my first time noticing that almost all of the wrist cuffs were hand-stitched. Next up is the metal eye suit. It was normally paired with its original belt, which was the eyelet belt, or the red macrame belt. It's most easily recognized by the eyelets that come down along the back of the arm. And the eyelets coming down the back of the arm were really difficult for me to see at the museum because they face all of the suits forward and you don't get to see the back detailing, which drives me bananas because there was constantly embroidery or some other detail going on in the back, which really made me wish that the museum had the suits on little turntables that would turn super slowly throughout the day, maybe in a way so that you could check on it 20 minutes later and it would have turned all the way around. When I was taking pictures of this belt, I was looking at how close the eyelets were to the edge of the fabric and thinking about how hard it would be to match those into the center every single time perfectly so that they wouldn't come off the edge when clamping them down. I noticed some odd little snags here and there on the suit, especially close to the seam lines where they possibly had to let the suit out or restitch it if he had ripped it. The zippers also often had hand stitching right next to them. I could see why you would do hand stitching right around the zipper, because if you didn't have as versatile of a sewing machine around, it was a lot easier to get a zipper sewn in by hand rather than fighting with a machine. I also got some detailed pictures of how the collars are connected to the base jackets so that I could see how thick that connection was. And the base collar before the height collar comes in is actually pretty thick up into the height collar. The suit named I Got Lucky, also called the Nail Swirl suit, was named after the album cover that it was on. He wore this one in Vegas, Oakland, Tampa, Los Angeles, and Denver. Normally wearing this with the white macrame belt, but occasionally the red one as well. While photographing this one, I really enjoyed getting the details of the ruching along the arm, because I was thinking about if you had elastic in there in the ruching, it would make movement so much more easy for him. I'm not sure if that's actually what they did, but I was thinking as a modern design, it'd be a really good idea to have more elastic within the costume to allow for movement. This suit also got a little bit of a puff sleeve, not all his suits had that, so I enjoyed photographing that. Then came the lace suit, usually paired with the white macrame belt. Photographing this one, I was a little sad that so many of the chains had broken. All those teeny tiny delicate gold chains could not handle the aging process. Again, this was a suit with ruching up the arm and hand stitching for the zipper. Especially in this picture, you can see the difference between the stitching that is along the V-neck compared to along the zipper. The stitching has a serious rhythmic pattern along that V-neck, but once you get to the zipper, they become a little less uniform. It's not nearly as noticeable unless you're looking for it or you've been told, but as a costume designer myself, I was looking for it and quickly noticed it on most of the suits. The winged or webbed fringe suit. There were two versions of it. The long fringe suit was in the 70s for Los Angeles, and then the short fringe suit was in 71 because he kept tripping over the long fringe of the 70s version. So in 71, he wore the short one in the January-February Vegas engagement. And gasp! There was no belt for this one. But when you have that much going on right here, I don't really think you'd want to have to fight to get a belt on there. I remember photographing this one going, damn, I'd trip over that every single time I'd take a step. Onto the corn? Corn. I like corn. Onto the turquoise concho suit. It had a matching belt with a matching name, and it was known for being on the Elvis Now album. In 1971. The knot suit, or the white tassel suit, was worn in the January-February Vegas engagement, and it was worn with the macrame belt of either white or blue. I wanted to get good pictures of this one, but it was way above my head. So now I can talk to you about the scale of this setup. I am only 5 feet tall. This was a 6 foot tall man. Now we have two mannequins of 6 foot stacked on toppity. Now we have two mannequins of 6 foot stacked on top of each other, plus the little bit of height in between each box. This setup was ridiculously tall and way above my head, and I wanted to get good pictures of so many of these suits, but I could not reach them. I so wished that they had like ladders or step stools, something, so that you could go up there and properly look at these suits that are a little higher up. Although I do understand wanting to keep the more valuable suits further away from the riffraff. So that's probably why most of the suits that are up top are a lot of the more pricey ones. Also in January, February of 71 for Vegas, we have the tassel star suit, normally worn with the white macrame belt, occasionally having the blue one. The white nail suit, also known as the white checkerboard suit, also worn January, February, and was normally paired with the purple macrame belt. When I took pictures of this one, I was again looking super detailed at all of the little stitches and as much as I could get on how all of these studs were inserted and what patterns they were in. Thanks to these pictures, what I was noticing was it was most likely all the inside seams were machine stitched, but a lot of the outside seams were hand stitched. Again, that might have been because they had to be restitched later on over time. I'm not exactly sure. The cobweb suit, also known as the white starburst, was normally worn with the gold attendance belt. There was also a light blue two-piece version of the cobweb suit. Another name for it was the English Lord suit, and normally worn with the gold attendance belt. Time for the Cisco Kids! There are a whole bunch of these suits. I am going to be reading them off. Here we go! There is the white Cisco Kid two-piece with black, the black Cisco Kid two-piece with light blue shoulders, the black Cisco Kid two-piece with red shoulders, the violet Cisco Kid two-piece with mid-blue shoulders, the black Cisco Kid jumpsuit with green shoulders, the black Cisco Kid jumpsuit with red shoulders, the black Cisco Kid jumpsuit with a light blue shoulders, and the white Cisco Kid jumpsuit with black leather shoulders. There were way too many of these. And he wore these ones for Vegas and Tahoe. As I said, a lot of the more expensive suits are displayed up on the top shelf, so the Cisco Kids that I got pictures of were normally up top. There were the fireworks suits. There was a black version and a white version. Both of them had original belts to the design. And they were the very first suits to have matching capes designed for them. I got pictures of the black one. And this one is obviously from the really early 70s because look at that waistline on that thing. I was looking at that thing going, dang, that would fit me. At the waist, at least. Way too much height, though. There's no way those pant legs would fit me. There were the pinwheel suits. There was a black one and a white one of this one, too. While he wore the white one in the 71 tour, it was most commonly seen in 72 when he was at Vegas. And for the white one, he would normally either wear the white matador belt, the red lion belt, or the lion head belt. And for the black one, it was the gold attendance belt. The snowflake suit, also called the spectrum suit, first ever worn in November of 71 for the Philadelphia concert at the Spectrum, which is why it's called the spectrum suit. It had an original belt, and there was an updated version of this made in 73, because right around 73, a lot of his suits had to be remade since he had gained weight. And now we're on to 72, Elvis on tour.